as I said earlier, we're just thrilled to have you. You're really doing so well in the world of herbal medicine, and I can't wait to get some solutions for myself about beating the winter blues, because I'm fed up with it being dark and gloomy already.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much, Sonia. That was such a lovely introduction, and I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for having me come on, because it is a very exciting topic. Because, like you say, and if you guys were here before we started the recording, we were just chatting about how miserable the weather is and how much of an impact it can have on how we feel. And especially living in the northern hemisphere, it does get very cold and very dark really early. So that kind of brings me on to what we're going to be talking about today, which is beating the winter blues naturally. So I'll just click onto the next slide. Bear with me, because tech is not my strong point. So this webinar is kind of going to be focusing on seasonal affective disorder, but it is going to be tapping into low mood as well, because not everyone has seasonal affective disorder. But you know, we all know what low mood feels like, but I just want to kind of go over seasonal affective disorder and kind of just give an overview of what it is, because a lot of people actually experience this without realizing. So it's a type of depression, and symptoms have a pattern. The symptoms have a pattern to them, so they generally appear in a cyclical kind of occurrence. So usually around late autumn and winter, because you know it's when the it gets dark and it gets cold and miserable, and we really notice how our mood is affected by that. However, it's interesting because in rarer cases, it can have a spring summer pattern, which is quite unusual. But people don't tend to experience that as much. And this is why seasonal affective disorder is sometimes referred to as winter depression, because it occurs more in winter and autumn. So it mirrors low mood in its appearance. So you may experience symptoms such as sadness, a lack of wanting to socialize, low energy, and just a general lack of interest in life. And this can be very distressing and difficult to experience because none of those symptoms are pleasant. However, the kind of defining thing with seasonal affective disorder is two additional symptoms that are quite prominent. So if you have SAD or SAD, I'm going to call it SAD throughout this webinar, because seasonal affective disorder is quite a mouthful to be saying it every time. So SAD, you might have two additional symptoms. So number one being your sleep is going to be affected. So people with SAD often experience a need to sleep more, and they also find it difficult to wake up in the morning, which is classic. I mean, I get that. Like I was saying this morning, I just want to stay in bed and huddle up and don't want to go out into the cold. And I think a lot of people can feel the same way. And also, number two symptom is people with SAD also experience an increased appetite and also food cravings. So lots of food cravings for carbohydrates and sugary foods. And also due to that, people see quite a lot of weight gain just because of those food cravings. And I suppose Christmas doesn't help as well, because, you know, we've got such an easy access to all of these lovely sugary carbohydrates, sweetie things. For example, I was just eating a festive Eccles cake before I came on here, which is not good, really.
No, but that's
But
so interesting about the cravings, because you think
mm,
about other forms of depression. You know, quite often people would lose their appetite, but to have that heightened craving, I suppose somehow the brain is trying to, perk itself up, or like get some energy going through that.
yeah, definitely. Because when we eat sugary and carbohydrate and junk food, it naturally triggers dopamine release, which naturally makes us feel better. So
Mm.
it is interesting, like you say, it kind of reminds me of quite a hibernation sort of thing. You know, like most animals stock up and prepare themselves for the winter. So it could be partially that, and also, yeah, it's dopamine. It's easy access to dopamine, which is a natural feel good chemical, which gives us that buzz and can help us lift mood. So definitely, I would say that those sugar cravings and carbohydrate cravings could be a self-preservation mechanism to help us come out of that sad experience. Now, it's really interesting, SAD, because they don't actually know what's causing it. There isn't a definitive, scientific record of, okay, people are experiencing SAD, this is why. But they have highlighted three main things. So the first thing is serotonin, the second thing is melatonin, and the third thing is circadian rhythms. Now, I am going to explain that. So vitamin D and serotonin I've kind of grouped into two things because, obviously, as I was saying, they don't know what causes it, but I was thinking about the influencing factors, and the influencing factors are the darker days, there's less sunlight. And that means we are not getting as much vitamin D because obviously when sunlight hits our skin, we start to synthesize vitamin D. And if we're not going outside as much in the dark and the cold, we're not getting exposure to sunlight. Now, this is interesting because vitamin D actually has a huge role in our serotonin activity and regulation. So we're not actually our serotonin regulation and production goes down due to our less vitamin D synthesis due to less sunlight. So it's really vitally important if you can in winter to go out and just get that little bit of sunlight on your skin because it actually has a huge role to play in serotonin. Now, for those who don't know, because we want to make sure that you understand everything when I'm doing this webinar, I'm just going to kind of explain what serotonin is. Now, serotonin is often referred to as your feel-good chemical. Now, it is a monoamine neurotransmitter. Because I love science, I'm going to go into science a little bit, but I am going to explain what that means. So a monoamine neurotransmitter, so that is a class of neurotransmitters, and it consists of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. And serotonin is also considered a hormone as well. So that's kind of just a baseline definition of what serotonin is. Now, most people are quite aware of what serotonin does for our central nervous system. So when we have normal levels of serotonin present floating around in our brain and around in our nervous system, we tend to feel calmer, happier, and emotionally more stable because serotonin is a mood regulator. And when our levels dip, this is when we can start to feel lower and less regulated. So that's why people say, oh, yeah, serotonin, dopamine, the feel-good chemicals, we need these to feel happy. That is, true, it is a part of mood regulation. Now, another interesting thing about serotonin, which people don't necessarily know as much, although it's starting to become more known, is the link between serotonin and the gut. So most people will, when I talk to them, think that serotonin is actually made in our brain and our nervous system. That's not necessarily true. Only 10% is actually made in our brain, which is quite fascinating to me because you would think, oh, nervous system, it's just sticking with the brain. And, actually 90% of our serotonin is actually produced in the gut, and it's produced in the gut by these cells known as enterochromaffin cells. And these little cells actually line the gut lining, which is really interesting. And they help us to secrete and produce serotonin. And serotonin also has a massive role in gut health and well-being because serotonin helps to regulate gut movement. So obviously, if your gut movement's not working properly, you can get things like constipation, diarrhea, also you're not absorbing or digesting as well. It also, serotonin helps to trigger the release of digestive enzymes. So yeah, we need digestive enzymes to digest our food and get our nutrition, which naturally makes us feel well. And it's also when serotonin is low in the gut, we can get bloating and other sorts of digestive irregularities. So it's very important. So that's the first thing that they're thinking what could contribute to SAD is the lack of the vitamin D in the shorter days, and because of that, we're not secreting as much serotonin as we would do in summer, which is quite fascinating. So I'm going to move on to melatonin. Now, people with SAD, they've found a consistent theme of people struggling to have issues with they're struggling with their melatonin production. So melatonin is a hormone and it is secreted in response to darkness. So again, think of those shorter days, those long dark nights. We're in more darkness than we usually are in summer. And this can cause us to feel sleepy. Melatonin makes us feel sleepy. So again, when our days become shorter and darker, melatonin production increases and causes those with low mood and SAD to feel lethargic and also have increased tiredness. And when we're tired and sleepy and lethargic, we're not naturally, joyous or happy, feeling uplifted. We're quite, slumped, and we're like, oh, well, I actually can't be bothered to do that work I need to do, or, because we're tired, we want to rest and hibernate like a bear. And obviously the increased melatonin in the winter months impact our circadian rhythms. So circadian rhythms, this is the third point that I think in the reason behind SAD. Circadian rhythms are also known as the body's 24-hour internal 24-hour clock, and it keeps your body happily operating on a sleep-wake cycle. So our body knows when it's time to sleep and when our body knows when it's time to wake up. However, when you experience SAD, you may find that your sleeping patterns change significantly because of this irregular and overproduction of melatonin. And also, you might struggle to adjust to the shorter days, and also when the clocks change, because that naturally disrupts our circadian rhythms. Our internal 24-hour clock is messed up because we're all an hour behind. Is that right? I think we're an hour behind. Spring forward, fall back. Yeah, an hour behind. And this can contribute to low mood. So that's the kind of three reasons behind seasonal affective disorder. So I always think with health, it's really good to kind of understand what's going on in your body, because it gives you a bit of autonomy and also empowerment into knowing actually what's going on in your own health. Because I don't know about other people, but sometimes when I'm feeling low mood, I always kind of check in with myself and be like, okay, so what is actually the mechanisms behind the way I'm feeling? Have I been outside today? Have I overslept or have I underslept? Have I eaten, and things like that. So I think it's really important to understand understand the reasoning behind the way that you're feeling, because it can help you feel a bit better. I know, with SAD, people feel awfully low and things like that, but it's not you. It is you, but it's not you, if that makes sense. It's all these, lack of sunlight and the days changing in the clocks and all sorts of things that can contribute to it. And
That's so true. The more you can understand about, like you say, the mechanisms behind how you're feeling a certain way, that leads you to the solutions, doesn't it? So
yeah,
this thing with the circadian rhythm being out of balance and how much that affects our mood, a lot of that is because we're now trying to carry on with an 8-hour working day, even though it's dark at the end of the day. So we're pushing our bodies into a state they don't want to be in. Ideally, we would hibernate, wouldn't we? Or we'd only work a short day in the winter,
mm,
and we'd eat early, and then we'd be tucked up resting, like they do in the Scandinavian countries more.
yeah.
But because we're pushing that all of the time, it's much harder for our bodies to stay in balance, isn't it? And then the cracks start to show. But the more we can understand it, then you know what the solution might be. That's brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, yeah, like once you understand, you can find out systems and ways that can work for you. So, for example, I get particularly affected in this time of year. My moods do go down. But I always try, if it's not an absolute blowing gale and chucking it down with rain, I just take a cup of tea on my lunch break and I just stand in the car park. I look a bit strange on this industrial estate, the mechanics that are next door are all going, like, what's that strange lady doing standing in the middle of the car park with a cup of tea? But that's just so I can get that 10 minutes of sunshine, because that's really important, because actually going outside and getting that sunshine can help set your circadian rhythms and set your internal clock, which is really important.
Totally. And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be warm, and it doesn't
No.
even have to be bright sunshine, but your
Mm,
brain knows what it is, doesn't it? The
exactly.
the other thing that I always think is important to mention, you don't have this worry, Dylan, because you're young and in your prime. But for those of us that wear glasses, you really need to be outside in the light and not wear your glasses, because you want the sun to be going actually into your eye, because that's what tells your brain, to, you know, that's what controls your brain and the circadian rhythm and the melatonin balance and everything else. And if we go outside with glasses on, it can't get into your eye, so it's not as effective.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that, Sonia. So thank you for
Oh, there
sharing
you
that.
are.
All right. Well, yeah, this is kind of a slide that I should have clicked, but I got far too into talking. So yeah, as we can see, less sunlight, reduced skin exposure, which means lower vitamin D, which means decreased vitamin D synthesis, and then disrupted serotonin. So yeah, that kind of just breaks it down into those three little things there. And I want to talk about herbs now because, as you said, I'm a medical herbalist and herbs are my passion, and I find them absolutely fascinating. And I'm going to try my best to stick to time here because I can talk about them for hours. Now, adaptogens. So, big buzzword, I think, at the moment. You know, I even walked into M&S the other day and it said that adaptogenic kombucha. And I was like, oh, wow. And they're kind of being bandied around. So I kind of just want to explain what an adaptogen is because I feel in today's society we're given a lot of words and a lot of people and most people don't actually know what that means. It's just a marketing tool almost. So what is an adaptogen? Now, plant adaptogens, so it's a class of herbs, basically. And plant adaptogens have been used by people since ancient times, but the term adaptogen itself is still relatively new. So it was introduced by a Soviet scientist called Nikolai Lazarev in 1947. So he actually started researching chemical compounds that were found in these plants, which he found helped to promote health by decreasing the negative effect of acute and chronic stress, which is very fascinating. And then his research was kind of took further in around 1957-58 by two other Soviet scientists called Brekman and Dardomov. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm sorry, I'm not a Russian speaker. Um, so yeah, and it was noted that
If I sit here.
and it was noted that adaptogens can increase a state of non-specific resistance to stress. So they're very interesting plants essentially. So they are kind of the criteria for an adaptogen kind of comes in three things. So an adaptogen is non-toxic in therapeutic doses. And it causes a non-specific state of resistance to stress. So what that means is they don't really know too much like how a non-specific resistance means we don't know really too much how the adaptogens work, but we just know that they actually regulate the body, and they usually do this through regulating, balancing our immune system, our endocrine system, and our nervous system, which is fantastic. And because of that, so much research has been actually put into these plants, and we're starting to know a lot more about them. And the interesting thing about these plants is they're usually found growing in quite extreme conditions. And so they're thinking that these chemical compounds that are really useful to us for increasing this non-specific resistance to stress is actually the plant's own immune system. And they are creating these compounds, these plants are creating these compounds to help protect them against the extreme conditions that they grow in. So it's almost as if they're creating their own immune system almost, if we were going to kind of compare it to us as a being. So this plant that we're going to talk about, rhodiola, is found growing in very harsh, cold climates. Okay, it grows on the mountainsides and on the top of cliffs in Siberia, Scandinavia, and Tibet. for example. So really cold, harsh conditions. Now, rhodiola is a fantastic adaptogen, and I'm going to talk about it now. So it's also known as Rhodiola rosea is the Latin name, just to let you know. So when you're buying something, just check the Latin name, because that makes sure that that plant is definitely what it is, and you want Rhodiola rosea. Commonly, it's referred to as golden root or root or just rhodiola. And it has a really long history of use in herbal medicine, especially in herbal medicine of Tibet, and in places such as Siberia and Scandinavia where it's found. Now, rhodiola is a plant that's really beneficial in what is known as asthenic conditions. So what that asthenic condition refers to is generalized physical weakness, lack of energy and strength. So that's an asthenic condition. Just you really slumped, kind of wasting, low energy, kind of low vitality condition. And these can manifest, I suppose, in day to day, because I feel like asthenic condition is kind of like quite a Middle Ages kind of term. Yes, he's got an asthenic condition. Just like, what is that really? So that can manifest in modern day-to-day life as, causing a, decline in work performance, sleep disturbances, people that have poor appetite, irritability, headaches, fatigue, just that general, just lethargy. And rhodiola is really beautiful in helping the body to cope with stress. Now, the reason I'm kind of talking about this herb is because in SAD, we don't want to be stressed as well, because that can make us feel worse and low. So we want a really lovely regulating herb. And this herb is also really beautiful for burnout as well. Because again, like I say, it promotes a non-specific resistance to stress. And what that means is it actually just regulates our nervous system, immune system, and endocrine. Adaptogens are just regulators. They just regulate your body. They're beautiful for that. Now, rhodiola rosea helps the body cope with stress by influencing several key systems. So in the brain, it helps to balance important mood and stress-related chemicals such as serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. Now, it does this partly by slowing their breakdown and improving their movement within the brain cells. So that may help enhance mental performance, mood stability, and resilience to stress, just helping us to feel a lot more level if those neurotransmitters are around in the brain for a lot longer. And rhodiola also helps to protect the heart and the adrenal systems during stressful situations, because obviously anybody that's been stressed will, be familiar with the symptoms of a racing heart. And also, the adrenal system is very important when we're stressed, because the adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys, are forced to release adrenaline and also cortisol, which can overstimulate the heart and also cause adrenal depletion, which can be called as adrenal fatigue if those hormones are always causing to be released. Basically, those glands just can't keep up secreting the adrenal hormones, which is cortisol and adrenaline. So rhodiola helps to protect those adrenal glands and the heart as well, which can help reduce the symptoms or the damage of stress on the body. Now, rhodiola also helps to support the body's natural feel-good opioid pathways. So this is a little bit more sciencey, but I'm going to say it anyway. So opioid pathways, so they increase opioid peptides and activate opioid receptors. So which overall, all of these actions that I've mentioned contribute to its overall adaptogenic property and helps the body maintain balance and function more effectively under stress. So does everybody understand that? I just don't want to be going too fast, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think we're all good.
Good. Fantastic. Okay, well, I'm going to talk about another adaptogen, which I really, really love, and it's in a mushroom. So it's a reishi mushroom. Now, the Latin is Ganoderma lucidum. Now, I'm saying all the Latin when I'm saying these herbs because, again, it's really important to know your Latin when you're purchasing herbs because anything can say, oh, yes, you know, like lion's mane or reishi mushroom or rhodiola. But if the Latin name doesn't match up, then that's not what you're getting. So it's a great way to ensure quality. Now, reishi is known as lingxi in Chinese herbal medicine because it is a Chinese herb, and that means it's referred to as the mushroom of immortality, which is very exciting, and it's revered by the Chinese for its positive and tonifying effects. Again, because it's an adaptogen, it's very regulating on the body, which is fantastic, but it's not as stimulating. Now, one thing I forgot to mention about rhodiola, it's quite a stimulating herb. So that's fantastic for when we're feeling low and sad, because we want something to stimulate us to help us feel a little bit more uplifted in a way. Now, it's, you know, if you're someone that doesn't respond well to coffee and things like that, you'll only need a little bit of it, because if you take too much, you'll be too overstimulated. But rhodiola is really beautiful for helping lift us in those times of depression by stimulating, which is great. But reishi is not stimulating in comparison. So this is a beautiful herb for people who don't do too well with a bit of stimulation. So in Chinese herbal medicine, Ganoderma or reishi is known as a Shen tonic. Now, what that means is it nourishes the emotional heart and calms the spirit to promote emotional balance and enhance mental clarity. It's an absolutely beautiful herb for that. It's really good balancing emotionally, and also we all know, you know, feelings of heaviness in the heart when we're sad and depressed. They're starting to realize now with research that the heart actually has its own nervous system, not just to function, you know, with the pumping, but it actually feels, which is fantastic. And we can actually store emotions there. So when we get heartbreak and grief, we feel it in the body and we feel it in the heart, which is, you know, so Ganoderma reishi actually helps nourish that heart center and helps to uplift us naturally, which is really lovely. And another thing about reishi, so when we are stressed or when we are low mood, have low mood, or we're struggling emotionally, our immune system naturally goes down and we can be a lot more susceptible to getting colds and flus, which, you know, nobody wants a cold on top of feeling depressed or anything like that, do we? That just does not help us to feel better. Now, reishi is an absolutely fantastic immunomodulator. What that means is it's a herb that regulates the immune system. So if your immune system is under functioning, it helps to lift it and bring it back up to baseline, essentially. That's the basics of what it does. And it's same again, if your immune system is over functioning, it helps to bring it down to baseline. And then you get a perfect immune system, essentially. Now, it is a fantastic herb for chronic fatigue and post-viral fatigue. I was actually reading last night, which I didn't know until last night, that it's been shown to be inhibitory to the Epstein-Barr virus. So anybody that's had mononucleosis, you know, the pit-kissing bug virus, and that mononucleosis can eventually turn into Epstein-Barr, which then turns into chronic fatigue, and it's actually very nasty. So Ganoderma reishi mushroom has been shown to inhibit the Epstein-Barr virus, which can help with reducing chronic fatigue and that post-viral fatigue, which is fantastic. So they're kind of
such a driver of chronic fatigue for people. Epstein-Barr, it's although there are other chronic viruses that can be involved, it's way more than half of people that have been given an ME diagnosis have got a post-viral problem from that virus. So it's amazing to use herbs to get it under control. You know, you can't with a virus like that, because it's part of the herpes family, you're never going to clear it from the body completely, but you can make it go dormant forever. And that's got such a bearing on mood, hasn't it? If your body's battling a virus all the time that's causing you fatigue, how could you possibly feel positive and happy in the summer, let alone in the winter? I just think the mushrooms are so fascinating because they've got properties that we in the West are only just learning about, aren't we? They're so quite new to our toolkit of remedies, if you like, and they are the ultimate adaptogens and have all of these properties that yeah, we're just learning. So reishi, it's brilliant to be talking about reishi.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Like you say, mushrooms, like in Chinese herbal medicine, they've been using it since like the dynasty, like,
Yeah.
pre BC. It's actually amazing what they use it for. They give it alongside chemotherapy, Ganoderma, reishi mushroom to help increase and keep that immune system up, because obviously chemotherapy is a massive drug that reduces and suppresses our immune system. So yeah, it's fantastic the research that's coming through, and I'm so glad that us in the Western society are starting to appreciate their value, which is great. But that's the one thing that I always want to make sure with everyone that I've noticed is there is a lot of fake mushrooms or really poor mushrooms products going on the market. So just remember your Latin names, because then you can ensure the quality, and also fruiting body. We want fruiting body if you're looking on supplements as well. So that's a really important thing, because there's nothing worse than paying an extortionate amount of money and getting something that's not good quality. Okay, so I want to talk about a lovely herb now. It's one of my favorite herbs, and it's part of the mint family, and it's really easy to grow as well, which is nice. But you just have to be careful, because it will take over your garden if you let it. Now, so yeah, lemon balm. It's part of the mint family, and its Latin name is Melissa officinalis. Now, I think it's a beautiful name because Melissa means honeybee, and the reason it was called Melissa is because in the past we used to plant lemon balm near our beehives, and that would act as a supplier of pollen and food and resource for the bees. And also it was a tradition to rub lemon balm leaves on the hives to attract bees, which was quite interesting. And the second name, officinalis, which I also found really fascinating, is it does show and actually records that this plant has been used for absolute centuries, since the Middle Ages at least. So officinalis comes from the word officina, which was an outbuilding that was usually found in a monastery. And that officina would be attached to a medicinal herb garden where monks would prepare medicinal remedies from the herbs. So obviously, monks were really responsible for helping treat the sick and the poor, the people that couldn't afford a doctor. So they would grow, and also themselves, so they would grow a beautiful herb garden, and this officina would be attached to this herb garden. And when Carl Linnaeus, so he was the gentleman that created the binomial system of nomenclature. So that is basically the classification of plants with the Latin name. He decided that the plants that were often found growing and being from the officina would retain the name officinalis. So any herb or anything that you see, so like Salvia officinalis, which is rose, Melissa officinalis, which is lemon balm, they're from the officina. So they were always grown in the herb gardens. So they've been used for centuries, which I think is really, really cool and fascinating. Because I am a massive history nerd, as more, herbal medicine and history is just my two favorite things. So I'm going to talk about what lemon balm does. So it is amazing, calming and uplifting herb. So that's perfect for when you're feeling a bit down in the dumps, because we don't necessarily want anything too calming or sedating, because if we're already quite low and quite emotionless and just feeling a bit numb, we don't want something that's going to suppress our nervous system anymore. So we want something that's really restorative and uplifting to the nervous system. Now, it actually is kind of like a nervous tropho restorative. What that means is it just helps to replenish and restore the nervous system, which it may sound odd, but when we are constantly feeling down or low and our nervous system or stressed and our nervous system is constantly firing, it can get quite exhausted and burnt out. So you want something that actually nourishes and replenishes the nerves, and that can help tackle feelings of overwhelm and exhaustion. Now I'm going to go a little bit sciencey for those people who want it. So lemon balm supports the nervous system, it supports cognition, and it also supports cellular health through several well-studied mechanisms. So one of its primary actions is on the GABA system. So if you've not heard of GABA, GABA is short, well, it stands for gamma aminobutyric acid. So that's the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter. So what that means is that neurotransmitter, its job is to slow down neural activity, which helps to reduce anxiety, and promote relaxation, relax the muscles, and also support healthy sleep. I always imagine GABA as, imagine, so like when you're anxious, you very like your brain's like running amok and it's like, which you don't really, that's going to make anyone feel stressed. GABA is like the neurotransmitter that comes in and just goes, whoa, okay, we don't need to be doing all of this. Just slow down and just chill out. So that's basically what GABA does. So I'm trying to make chemistry and all that sort of thing. Yeah, sensible and easy to understand, because what's the point of being explained something if you don't understand it? That's one way it does it. And lemon balm enhances GABA activity. And because how it does that is it prevents GABA from breaking down and going away. So basically that's kind of how sedative and anti-anxiety medications work, which is very interesting because that's what we want. We if we want a natural kind of I'm not saying that herbs are a good natural alternative to medication. Don't come off your medication and be like, I'm just going to take lemon balm, but that's what I'm saying. Lemon balm acts very similarly to anti-anxiety or sedative medications through that GABA pathway. That's how it does it. Now it also influences the cholinergic system, and that is a system that's essential for memory and cognitive function. So acetylcholine, that's another important word to remember, is a key neurotransmitter that's involved in learning, memory, formation, and attention, basically. So acetylcholinesterase, also known as ACHE, is an enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine after it transmits a signal. So when ACHE is inhibited, something that lemon balms, rosmarinic acid, and terpenoids can do, so these are constituents that are found in the lemon balm, acetylcholine levels stay higher for longer, and this helps us to improve communication between our neurons, and it also helps to support our memory, focus, and cognitive functioning, and also sustains mental clarity, which is kind of how Alzheimer's medication works. So this is just why I want to explain this, because it's fascinating how plants can kind of mimic conventional medication. It's almost as if conventional medication was based off plants. How strange. Okay. So beyond its neurological properties and effects, lemon balm also has potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties too. So it's fantastic for decreasing inflammation. And it also has a great effect on the gut. And it's been shown to influence the gut microbiome, primarily through it being antimicrobial. So it helps to kill bad gut bacteria and help to promote good bacteria. It reduces inflammation in the gut and is antioxidant. So that's interesting, because if we go back to the beginning of the webinar, where does 90% of our serotonin, where is that made? In the gut. So if we have a healthy gut microbiome, that can also really help our mood. So that's why I picked lemon balm to talk about, because it's fantastic for the nervous system, but it also has a really, really good gut effect. And we want to keep our microbiome healthy, because if our microbiome is healthy, that helps our serotonin to be produced too. Does anybody have any questions? I know I went a little bit sciencey there, and I do
Uh,
apologize.
there is a question in the chat actually about these herbs and if there are any contraindications with medications. Shall I
Mm-hmm.
say the ones that I know about, and then you can add any that you that I maybe I've forgotten.
Yeah, sure.
So of the things that you've talked about already, I know that with lemon balm in higher doses, there can be a concern if people are taking thyroxine.
Yeah.
I've never found it to be a problem with any of my clients over the years, but then we don't use high doses of individual herbs. We're using the blends with smaller amounts in, and we're not using extracts, so that might be why. But I've never come across it as a problem. Then I also know that with the reishi, if people are taking blood thinners, there is on paper a concern. So again,
Mm.
if you are taking blood thinners, I would encourage people to either work with a herbalist or start with a very low dose and just very slowly increase it up. And the only other one that I'm thinking of with the rhodiola, again, I wouldn't take a high dose, or I wouldn't suggest a high dose to somebody who is already taking an antidepressant, because it is so powerful and it's working in the same sort of area. So you might be taking an antidepressant and then take a big dose of rhodiola, and it could sort of upset your brain chemicals. But again, to work with a herbalist or to start very gently, or maybe just with a small amount in a blend, like the ones that we have on Hello Wellness, I would say you would be fine with the rhodiola. Anything I've forgotten?
No, you've summed it up beautifully, Sonia. Like you
Right.
say, it it's interesting because there can be a lot of contraindications, but when you're looking at the scientific research studies, they're testing doses that are 3 times higher or 4 times higher than actually we would give or prescribe, or it's an isolated chemical from the plants. So you always have to be very mindful of that, because I think it's very easy to see a big flashing red headline being like danger, danger, but actually if you look into it, it's actually not as, it's very specific that these cases, like you say, as a herbalist, I've given drugs, herbs alongside those conventional drugs, and the appropriate dosages, and they've all been fine. And sometimes as well, these herbs can actually help promote the effect of the conventional medication, and actually work with the conventional medication to create a nice and a better outcome for those people taking them. But yes, always, if you're unsure, that's what I always say. If you're unsure, always ask, go and see a herbalist or a naturopath, or, someone trained in those fields. And we're more than happy to help advise you, because there's nothing worse than being nervous about taking something. We don't want that at all. But thank you. Now, I'm going to talk about my favorite herb now, probably because I'm named after this herb. This is my middle name, is rose. So Sappho, who was a Greek poet, she called it and hailed it as the queen of the flowers. Now, rose is an absolutely beautiful herb. Now, I was reading a research study whilst I was doing the preparation for this webinar, and it was interesting. I just went on a rabbit hole, and even looking at flowers. So they did this research where they put roses in an office, and actually everyone's emotional health, like well-being, by the end of the experiment had gone up just by having roses in the office, which I was like, wow, how beautiful is that? So this is a beautiful herb for help lifting low mood. It's really, if you've ever had rose tea, or if you've ever taken rose as a tincture, you just taste it, and you suddenly, I always say, it feels like it's almost giving you like a warm hug across the chest. Now, it's really tied in with the energetical center of the heart, in energetical herbal medicine. So it's really great for conditions where there's again, remember when I was saying the heart has its own nervous system, and it can feel, so it really nourishes that heart nervous system and that emotional heart space. So it's also really good for conditions where there's grief, heartbreak, low mood, and where, any sort of emotion that's affecting our enthusiasm for life. I always prescribe rose, because in so many books throughout history, if you look at rose, it always says uplifting and gladdener of the emotional heart. So I always feel like rose, everybody needs a bit of rose in their life, and it pretty much doesn't interact with anything. It's a very beautiful, simple herb, and even the smell in aromatherapy with rose is a very uplifting and beautiful scent. So yeah, I would suggest get some roses or get some rose perfume or whatever, you know, it's beautiful. I love it. Okay, so I want to talk about one of the main herbs actually, because we were kind of talking about this earlier, weren't we, Sonia? Before starting this webinar, St. John's wort. So big herb for depression. Also, quite a lot of misinformation about it, a lot of fear around it. St. John's wort is a great herb. That's my first beginning statement of talking about this. Now, St. John's wort, Hypericum perforatum is the Latin name. Now, it's interesting because hypericum comes from the Greek and it means to be over an apparition. Now, in the Middle Ages, they called it hypericum because they believed that it had an ability to strongly repel evil spirits, because that's kind of what they thought the cause of illness was back in the day before we had these, you know, x-ray machines, blood tests and all that sort of things. They thought spirits would come in the body and cause illness. So that's why hypericum is called to be over an apparition, because it's such a great herb for boosting health. Now, perforatum is interesting. If you've ever held a St. John's wort leaf and hold it up to the sun, it's got little perforations, it's got little holes through it. You see the sunlight coming through, which is really beautiful. So that's just about the Latin. Now, it's a lovely plant that lifts the spirit and also regulates mood. Now, it's been kind of pigeonholed to do one thing and act as a natural antidepressant, but it does so much more than that. So this herb does have the ability to naturally act as a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, an SSRI, which, you know, if you take sertraline or, you know, sertraline, you'll be very familiar about what an SSRI does. So I'm going to explain for those who don't know, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor means that it acts to allow for serotonin to stay for longer in the brain. So you have that increased uplifted effect from the serotonin. It helps to regulate and elevate moods, essentially. So St. John's wort can do that. It keeps serotonin around in the brain for longer. However, in herbal medicine, we don't just see hypericum. Sorry, I'm trained in Latin, so I'll keep accidentally calling the herb in its Latin name. St. John's wort is not just a natural antidepressive. We don't just see it as this one trick pony. St. John's wort has other amazing effects on the nervous system. So it's a nervous system tropho-restorative. Now, that's a herbal medicine term. What that means is it restores and strengthens the nerves, and it's a very specific convalescent remedy. So convalescent remedy is specific for where there's a nervous system exhaustion due to burnout, or, you know, you've been through a really heavy illness or some really traumatic event, and, you know, there's just exhaustion. Our nervous system is just completely frazzled. St. John's wort is really, really good for that. It's also got a beautiful yellow flower, St. John's wort. So it's almost as if it's like a sunshine plant. When you take it, it's like a big ray of sunshine starts to kind of come into your life. And also a yellow flower also signifies something else, but I will tell you about that in a moment. Now, St. John's wort is also used frequently in herbal medicine for nerve pain, because it's really restoring and it looks after the nerves. It's really specific where there's inflamed or damaged nerves. So it's very good for things like neuralgia or sciatica, for example. Now, again, when I said about that yellow flower, St. John's wort is a fantastic gut herb. Things with yellow flowers often have a great effect on the liver, but I'm going to come to that in a moment. So it's a fantastic gut herb because it's bitter. When you taste it, it's quite bitter. And when we taste anything bitter, that stimulates the bitter taste receptors in our tongue, which then stimulates the vagus nerve and also stimulates our digestive system to get going and be ready to receive food. So our digestive enzymes get released, bile and all of the things, you know, because the body is ready to go for us to eat and digest. So St. John's wort is really good for the gut. Again, think of the gut microbiome and the benefit of serotonin. So it's beautiful for that. Now, it's a fantastic herb for supporting the liver as well. It's really good for supporting liver function, and it helps to promote the liver's work in breaking down hormones and getting rid of toxins and wastes. So I want to mention the excess hormones that we have in our body. So if our liver is not functioning optimally, it doesn't work as well. And sometimes hormones can get stuck and blocked up and stick around for longer than they need to in our body. So if you think of cortisol, again, that's a big buzzword at the moment. Cortisol is known as the stress hormone. So when that starts staying in our body, we naturally feel more frazzled, more tense, more uptight. We have interrupted sleep, that classic feeling of being tired but wired when you go to bed. You know, you're lying there, I feel exhausted, but I just can't switch off. That's because you've got too much cortisol usually going around in your body. Now, St. John's wort helps the liver and its pathways to break down all these hormones and get them out of the body. So it's fantastic for that. And naturally as well, if your liver is helping to get rid of toxins and wastes, we're not going to be as inflamed. We're not going to be feeling like a kind of stagnated swamp, because when you've got toxins and things built up in the body, we naturally feel more like, you know, we don't feel healthy, we don't feel sprightly. So that's one thing you have to consider. I also want to say it's also really fantastically antiviral. Again, remember how I referred to when we're stressed, low mood, our immune system goes down. St. John's wort is fantastic antiviral for helping us be less affected by viruses that are floating around in the air. So it's really good for supporting the immune system. Now, the interesting thing is with St. John's wort, I want to come to breaking the fear of it. So when anything is discovered by conventional medicine, or when anything is, you know, classed as a natural antidepressant, obviously there's going to be research into it, which is good because we get to learn about what the plant does and things like that. But the downside is a lot of things can become quite scary about the plant. So I just want to tell people what are the main things that you can't take St. John's wort with, and also really, you know, what it does, and, you know, you can take it with some things. So I'm just kind of myth busting right now. That's what I'm trying to say. So the reason St. John's wort has all these contraindications is because of its amazing effect on the liver. Now, if the liver is working and helping to break down things, what else can it break down? It can break down conventional medication, can't it? So if we're taking conventional medicine that needs to be around in our body for certain periods of time, and St. John's wort is speeding up the metabolism of that drug and kicking it out of the body, that can cause some problems. So this main one that I'm going to straight away go to is contraception. Now, there have been studies of women taking birth control and taking St. John's wort alongside it. They were getting pregnant, and it was quite interesting because it actually happened to a friend of a friend who was working in a sexual health clinic, and they could not figure out why all these young women were coming in and getting pregnant when they were on contraception. And luckily, my friend, who's a herbalist, said, what are they taking? What was the one thing they all had in common? They were taking quite high doses of St. John's wort. So if you're on contraception, give St. John's wort a miss. There's loads of other herbs you can take instead. Also antidepressants, specifically SSRIs, because St. John's wort is pretty much works the same way as an SSRI by increasing serotonin in the brain. So we don't want too much serotonin in the brain because it can cause serotonin syndrome. And that's when you can start feeling irritable, dizzy and nauseous and things like that. That's just not pleasant. And again, immunosuppressants and anti-retrovirals. So if people have HIV, for example, and they're put on antiretrovirals because St. John's wort has an antiviral activity, we don't want that interacting. So stay away from that if you're on them. Don't take St. John's wort. And also anticoagulants. Although I'm not too, I think sometimes it depends on the case, but see a herbalist if you're taking anticoagulants and you want to be taking St. John's wort. You also can't take this herb whilst you're pregnant too, because it's in a menagogue. What that means is in herbal medicine is it helps to bring on a period. So obviously if you're pregnant, you don't want a period to be brought on. I'm also going to say as well, so it's interesting with herbal medicine because a lot of people feel like you should take it and it works within a couple of days. It's not like that. Some herbs have that effect and they work straight away, but some herbs take a little bit longer. St. John's wort is one of those herbs that can take a little bit longer to have an effect and get into your system. I usually say around 4 weeks you've got to be taking it before you start seeing a great effect in the body. It is a natural uplifter and you might start seeing it sooner, but 4 weeks I think is around standard. So yeah, that's what I just wanted to say about St. John's wort, because it's a beautiful herb and you shouldn't be scared of it. And I'm gonna go on to some complementary strategies. Now, I hope that you've all kind of thought of some things that you could implement into your own lives to help with low mood. For example, like I said, I take a cup of tea and I go and stand outside in the car park for about 10 minutes just to get some sunlight on my face. So if you can go out more, if you can walk to the shop, or if you can take your dog for a walk, then do it, because that really helps, because sunlight helps to set our circadian rhythms, our internal clock, and it helps us to secrete vitamin D. Taking vitamin D, that's also a really good one. I also want to say, if you're taking vitamin D, make sure you take magnesium glycinate alongside, because magnesium really helps our absorption of vitamin D too. And also look after your gut microbiome. So really simple things. I actually created an Instagram post the other day actually, and on 3 simple things that you can do to start looking after your gut. Obviously there's herbs, that's a big one, but bitter herbs are fantastic. Lemon balm is an aromatic bitter, dandelion root, all sorts of things like that. I think I've actually got, here we go, I've got a list of some herbs too. So here are some gut-friendly herbs that I really love. So marshmallow root, it's really high in mucilages, so that means it's really slimy. And what it does is it kind of it lines your entire gut lining and digestive tract and helps soothe it, and is naturally anti-inflammatory, and it helps to keep it, healed and functioning well. And it's also a little bit antimicrobial, so it helps to get rid of bacteria. And it's also a lovely prebiotic as well, which means prebiotics help to feed beneficial bacteria in the gut. And remember, your gut lining is really, really important, because you've got that enterochromaffin. I really struggled to say that word. Cells which secrete your serotonin. It's got all your immune cells in there as well. So a healthy gut lining is really important. Another beautiful herb to take for gut lining is meadowsweet, which is Filipendula ulmaria. Because that is really anti-inflammatory, and it's also been shown to really deeply repair the gut lining, which is fantastic. And then you've got your herbs like chamomile and fennel and calendula. Calendula is antifungal, which is great because we can have some people can have like candida in the gut, which is not good, because we don't want overgrowth of candida. Calendula also helps heal the gut lining too. It's also bitter, it helps the liver. Fennel is great because it's antimicrobial, and it also is helping with bloating, and it helps to relax the gut. And chamomile is great against general anxiety disorder actually, and it's really good for helping to relax the gut as well as the mind. And cardamom is just an all-rounder. It's just a great herb for all sorts of things. So yeah, and no snacking in between meals, although I'm terrible for that, because the gut needs time to clear bits of residue, food residue out, and bacteria out of the gut. So if we're constantly shoving things in our mouths, like I do when I'm stressed, then, our gut is not going to be healthy, which, we want to avoid that. And also a really beautiful exercise, because so many of us are used to rushing around and before eating meals, or, feeling tense. It's just a great thing is just to breathe and also to hum, because when we breathe and we hum, it actually activates our vagus nerve. And our vagus nerve is part of our parasympathetic nervous system. So if you've ever heard of the fight or flight response, so in the fight or flight response, when we're feeling stressed and on the go, our sympathetic nervous system is in control there, and our parasympathetic kind of shuts off. Really, in an ideal world, we want to be run by our parasympathetic nervous system. We want that to be switched on the majority of the time, because the parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for our rest and digest response. So when we're humming, it gets the vagus nerve kicked in, we take a deep breath, it makes us feel safe. Our sympathetic nervous system switches off, our parasympathetic nervous system switches on, and we start to feel really relaxed and ready to eat our food. And that naturally helps us to absorb more, to digest better, helps stop that after dinner bloating, because really, to have 100% healthy gut, we shouldn't actually be aware of our gut most of the time. If we're aware of it, there's something that's not right. If we're having bloating, or if we're, have that cramping or something like that, our gut's not 100% healthy. And, it's really hard to achieve 100% healthy gut. Don't beat yourself up about it. If oh goodness, I get a bit of bloating, that's fine. We all do. But, try and do the best you can just to help increase your gut microbiome health, because you'll notice a massive difference in your energy levels, your sleep, and your mood. So, yeah, I think that's everything. So, yeah, here are the kind of summarize the end of the webinar. So yeah, herbal support, really great way, natural way to increase your mood levels and nourish your nervous system and help reduce SAD. Light exposure, you can't ever beat the effects of the sun. Something as simple as the big glowing orb in the sky, it's fantastic for helping to, support our vitamin D and your gut health as well. So you can do that through eating really colourful foods and using gut supportive herbs as well. And you don't have to struggle through winter. It's a rough time on everyone. It's cold, it's wet, it's miserable, it's dark. But you can do things through natural health and help kind of make it less harsh. So that's pretty much everything, I think. Oh goodness, I'll go back onto that. But thank you all so much for coming and listening to me ramble on. I really appreciate it. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask too.
It's been amazing. Yeah, it's really been great. You've covered so much, lots of ideas for people to try, easy things as well. I mean, obviously, as you know, Dylan, because you work for Nature's Laboratory as well, our fabulous little Hello Bliss capsules have got lots of elements in of the herbs you've been talking about. So there's the reishi in there and the rhodiola, and they are working so well for people. They're really, really easy. Out of all of the things that you've suggested, what do you think works the most quickly? Because I would have said I find that St. John's wort works for people, starts to uplift them after a few days. I was surprised. Probably does take longer to get the full benefit of it.
Yeah.
But sometimes we just need something to lift us really quickly, don't we? I mean, a lemon balm tea, that can really change how you feel
Yeah.
quickly, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, you can start feeling the effects of St. John's wort pretty much within a few days. But I always say, yeah, to get the full effect and you start really feeling that benefit, especially if there's something really chronic, because chronic things don't go within a few days, but so you need chronic, consistent use of herbs to help combat that chronic negative feelings, basically. But so yeah, St. John's wort is a good one to take. But yeah, like you say, my favorite thing was to get a kind of fast acting, I call it a hug in the mug, in a mug, is rose and lemon balm, because lemon balm also, what I forgot to mention, is really specific for nervousness that affects the heart. as well. So when we are very anxious and we're getting palpitations, lemon balm is really beautiful for helping to calm the heart down. And it's also really good for helping when we get butterflies in the tummy because it acts on the gut as well. So the also with lemon balm, because it's a mint and we all know what mint smells like, you know, if you rub a mint leaf, it's very fresh and it's right there. Now they're volatile oils that are on in that leaf that you're getting that smell from. Now the beautiful thing about volatile oils is when we ingest them, they're very uplifting and they're very clearing, you know, straight away you can. So yeah, like fresh lemon balm tea with rose is a beautiful combination for when you're feeling a little bit down, or even just smelling like if you have an aromatherapy burner or something like that, you can get some rose essential oil. That's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing just to have in the room, just around. And yeah, you know, I used to sit on my doorstep and, you know, drink a fresh lemon balm tea with rose and try and get some sun. That's a nice way to do it.
Yeah, that's so lovely. So lovely. Thank you. So yeah, just to say, so yeah, it's our Hello Bliss capsule that has got all of these different herbs in that's designed to lift the mood in the winter. And that's you can get actually just a little sample pack on our website with 7 capsules in, just to give it a try rather than going for a full pot of 60. But they work really, really well. So yeah, just to say, because somebody else asked earlier, all of these webinars, they're hosted on our YouTube channel, and you can click on them really easily from our website. So on the hello-wellness.co.uk website, we have the page of Nature's Notebook. So that's all of the blogs that we've put in our newsletters and all of the practitioners like Dylan who've come to do a webinar for us once a month on all different subjects, and all of the links for the webinars are there as recordings, because I know sometimes you think, oh, I want to go back and listen to that again. So they're all there, they'll be there in perpetuity, so that anybody can go back and have another little look. Sorry, just one more question. Just started taking the Hello Bliss underactive thyroid, best time to take it. So yeah, underactive thyroid, it'll work really really well for you. That's completely fine because of all of the adaptogenic properties. It doesn't matter whether you take it with food or on an empty stomach, that doesn't make any difference at all. And I would say best time to take it is in the morning when you're starting the day, so that you're bringing your system into that daylight mode right away. And another question, I walked into Baldwin's last year and could smell lemon balm essential oil and bought some immediately. Oh, that's so wonderful. It is, essential oils are brilliant, aren't they? And it's just
Yeah.
another way to get your herbalness into you. You don't have to necessarily swallow everything. Pop something in a burner, and that's really, really nice. Oh, it's been so lovely, Dylan. Thank you so much for
Thank
doing this
you.
for us.
Oh, no
I'm going
worries.
to go away and put all of these things in a mug and just get all of them into me right now.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a good afternoon, definitely.
definitely. And whilst sipping it outside with my glasses off, obviously. Do tick,
Yeah,
tick, 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 tick.
yeah.
No, that's been really brilliant. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, and thank you everyone for coming. It's been a pleasure.